think we have to be a little selfless about this. I think that the best return we can get on our political investments is to ask people for something without having an expectation in return. So in other words, we should really have meaningful engagement where we're asking people to come out to vote, we register them, we get them educated, we get them to turn out, but there's no expectation that they vote for me because I'm running for governor or I'm running for U.S. Senate. It's because we're doing it to improve the lives of our community. I think if enough of us started thinking that way, and I know it's sort of contrary to the traditional approach, which is go find a dynamic statewide candidate, build a program around that candidate, but you're driving that candidate's message and that, that electoral strategy to get them out to vote. With people who have not been voting, I think that they are suspicious of those things. And so, to come up with a very genuine peer-to-peer engagement platform that doesn't have an expectation. The only expectation is that you're going to vote and you're going to bring your neighbor with you and you're going to take your 15-year-old son or daughter with you so that they can see what it's like to vote. I think if we had a sincere strategy like that, and of course that's extremely idealistic, but we ought to measure that. I mean, we have the resources to measure that. We have the strategists to actually design those programs. We ought to just test it.
Are those programs within campaigns in your view? Because that's a hard sell to say you have $200,000 to run a campaign and I want you to take $50,000 and run a program like that.
I just cut a $50,000 check to the state party. I have no idea where it's going. I think if you're invested, you're invested, right? I mean, people, Stacey's selfless. I mean, she's doing this engagement, strategy, and she doesn't have an expectation, today that it's going to bear return for her. Maybe one day people will remember that she started all of this. I think that there are people in states that we are targeting that will take this leap of faith. And frankly, look, if we don't try anything different, we're going to get the same result that we always had, which is we're going to sit here and talk about the potential and never really realize it. If we want to realize it, it's time to get creative and try things that have the opportunity to be successful.
Yeah. And I'll just add, as somebody who's been involved in starting and running this PAC, for PowerPAC Plus, I actually think there is a tremendous value in identifying activists who are willing to run for office. I think that the three people who were up here with us earlier, two of them are still here, but Mark as well, are all people who, had they been elected or not, were in some way or another activists within their communities, leaders, people who were speaking out on issues, people who were taking responsibility for the future of their communities and, whether it was in their close-in local area or even more broadly. And I think that when we look for candidates, we actually, it's something that really makes somebody stand out. When we're thinking about somebody's endorsement, if they're a first-time candidate for office, what have they done before? Are they somebody who, in fact, has a long history in working in a community, because that has a great deal to do with the ability to hold that person accountable, right? And that's usually going to be the base that they're going to rely on when they run for office. And let's face it, many, perhaps even most candidates running for office today don't have that profile. They're coming in because they just think they've got great ideas and the rest of the world should have to somehow listen to them and enact them. And so I think there really is an important role, and that's something that when I'm convincing people that they should support PowerPAC Plus, who are my fellow community activists and whatnot, it's something that I like to bring up a lot. We were flashing pictures earlier of the candidates that we've supported in the past and will be supporting in the upcoming election. Hector Balderas was one of those people, somebody from New Mexico, who ran a race, is going to be running for AG now in New Mexico, lost the last time around, but we felt very proud of the fact that we had supported him in a primary race because we wanted to be able to promote and be that, be that supporting group of people behind a candidate who was going to be raising important issues in that primary and really representing issues we felt were reflective of what that community really stands for and cares about.
A question on the floor. Thanks for your patience.
Chuck Rocha, Solidarity Strategies, Washington, D.C. via Texas. The question would be for both the state reps. As we talk about all the potential, and we will always talk about potential and the power that needs to grow, I would ask the question, since you are both so close to the electorate every day and have to do retail politics every day in your respective districts, that we have less people participating in the process. We have several layers of an election plan, new register, pushing out drop-off voters. In Texas alone, there's 1 million people who voted for the president in the presidential election who didn't vote in the governor's election. Of that million people, 584,000 of them are Latino. The question is, based off of those numbers, we went back and asked a portion of that 580,000 Latinos about the upcoming election, and 68% of them don't even know that there's an election in 2014. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't vote. My question is this, not just to regurgitate numbers, because that's what I love. It's about, if you had an unlimited budget, Trey, and most of the time people have to do this outside of a campaign, but you are the campaign because you have to run your own campaigns and be very tied to the community. What do you see, especially in the Latino community, and you, Ms. Abrams, in the African-American community in Georgia, of if you could tell a room full of really smart people, evidently, what is you've seen that could actually move a percentage? We'll never get them all back, but if you have a lot of people who are right now in this town who really think they're smart, so smart they don't have to be here, who are making those decisions, right, on the other side of the railroad tracks, what would you say to them other than, we need to connect to the community, you need to invest in the community, we need to build infrastructure? We've heard all of that. What would you do?
The best way I can try to answer that is, I mean, look, I'm 7-term House member, I chair a caucus, I'm always moving across the state, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, but I've said, I've said it to Battleground, I've said it to people running statewide campaigns in Texas, I have said, look, I will underwrite and I will fund an office in the west side of San Antonio, and my only request is that you pack the House, it's a 24-hour campaign operation, and our strategy is specifically to talk to people who aren't voting. I'm still waiting. All right, I'll pay for the lease, I'll take out the insurance, I'll do, I'll install the phone lines, whatever it needs. I think there's talk and then there's action, right? And so we talk about it and we have some really great ideas, but now it's time to implement. And I think we have to show up. I think the last time the west side of San Antonio saw a full-fledged, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation based on campaigns and election strategy was probably in the 1960s, probably in the 1970s. And so, for anybody who's connected to those organizations, I'm still here, and I can write that lease tomorrow. So that's the best that I can do. And if I can't take the leap by myself, I can't fund it, staff it, run it, I can do my part, and I'm willing to be a team player in that aspect.
So what we've done, we did this actually last year, and it was a test run, because I think we have to always think about this in sort of three tracks. We talk about C3, C4, and politics. On the C3 side, for example, when I say we have to talk about the ideas, people have to understand what they're voting for. They don't vote for governor. Number one, they don't know about it. Number two, they don't know what the person does. So what we did last year around the Affordable Care Act was we raised money. Unlike Trey, we have much less money coming my way in Georgia. So I begged people outside of Georgia to give me $150,000. We hired through the C3 60 community members. We didn't bring people down from Atlanta. We went to the poorest area of the state, hired 60 folks, got the SEIU to come down and train them. We took all of that information that was floating out there about the ACA and got them to translate it for us and actually put it into language that would be accessible to that community. And then we paid them. We paid them to canvass for 8 weeks. They did more than 25,000 door knocks, 170,000 phone calls. We had them do door-to-door conversation, not about signing up for the exchanges, but what is insurance? Why does healthcare matter? We have to remember that all of us in this room, the really smart people, forget that not everyone talks about this every day. They're thinking about, as Trey said, they're thinking about, how am I going to make the rent? Am I going to be able to get my kid to school today? Is he going to get kicked out of school because he got into a fight because he was hungry? Like, those are the things they're worried about. So we have to be willing to go to the very grassroots, but more importantly, we have to be granular about it. And we have to understand that this is not a tomorrow issue. This is a next week issue. So we have to start today to get ready for that next conversation. And the reason we did this in 2013 was for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to understand what it would take to help transform a community that's among the poorest in the state of Georgia. How do you get that community engaged? And it worked. They signed up for the Affordable Care Act at higher rates than anyone expected. And they're actually paying one of the highest rates in the nation for that insurance, but they understand what they're asking about now. We also kept that group of 60, and we had them find 300 volunteers. Those volunteers then went into their community groups to talk about these issues. It's not dumbing it down, but it is simplifying the conversation. But if I had unlimited resources, I would hire 600,000 Georgians, because poor people want to do right for their community. Middle class folks want to be engaged, but when you have to make a trade-off between engagement and survival, you're going to go with survival. And so if I had unlimited resources, I would be hiring people on the ground, those community members, not the ones we expect to volunteer after church, but the people who make this their living. Their living is to understand and translate for their community members and to recruit. Again, I believe in a very evangelical model. You start where people are and you help them grow where they are so that they push the information out. And if you can do the C3 work, if you can do the C4 work, that's when they start to vote. They vote when they understand why voting matters. And until we deal with the grassroots issues and the base issues, they're never going to understand why voting makes sense.
People need to understand the issue. I think once you explain it to them, it's great. I mean, I'd say all the time, hey, we need to tighten our belt. We need to hold the line on spending. I say that in my house. I mean, we clip coupons. I mean, it sounds good. But if I told them, well, that doesn't just mean Medicaid and food stamps, which you don't receive. I'm talking about fixing this road. I'm talking about building